Hi, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I thought today I'd start a little bit of a series on photography. I'm going to call it Taking the Mystery Out of Photography. When someone starts in photography these days, it's very bewildering, I would think, although a lot of people, of course, are using their phones to do photography on, and they're used to having everything automatic. But if you want to go on a little bit further with photography these days, it helps to know a little bit of the history of where we've been in the last 50 years or so, 60 years, 70 years maybe, and where we're at now, and see how, knowing what transpired when I first started doing photography, the cameras we were using and the settings we had to adjust manually on our cameras, and how that compares with today's automatic and all seeing, all dancing, all everything digital cameras. So I'm going to just start off with some basics on this one. It's not going to be too long, this one, but I'm going to be moving down the track about things like aperture and shutter speed, aperture settings, shutter speed settings, depth of field, a sensor in a digital camera versus film in a film camera, program versus manual settings on cameras, both film cameras and digital cameras, manual and auto focus, zone focus, we used to do that in the old days, light metering, both in your camera and using a handheld light meter, and what we call white balance, which is similar situation, a similar topic to film types, which we used to use in the old days. You used to have a certain film depending on the light that you were dealing with, whereas you can adjust your white balance on a digital camera these days, and that can solve the problems. So, and I'm going to talk about, as we go, the pros and cons of film versus digital, and whether you should still be doing both or only one these days. I met a man the other day who's been into photography about 10 years. He's slightly older than me, but he'd never used film. He came in at the digital end, really. So that's interesting, isn't it? So I'm going to show you three cameras here now. This one here is a film SLR, and it's all metal. It's a Pentax. It's got a bit of a loose bit on the front there, but this is still a working camera. And I'm going to show you what's inside that camera in here compared to what's inside one of these other cameras here. For instance, this one here. So that's called a film SLR camera, the other one. SLR means single lens reflex, which means that when you look through the viewfinder, it's like looking through a binoculars. You're actually looking through the lens to focus the photo. So this one here is a Canon. It's a Canon 700D SLR, digital SLR camera. And in many ways, this camera and the other camera does the same things. Both this one and the other one has what's called a mirror in it. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then this latest camera I've been using a bit lately is this little Olympus SLR camera. It's a single lens reflex camera, but it's mirrorless, so it doesn't have a mirror. You actually don't look through the optical, you don't look through the lens, you're looking through an optical viewfinder on the back of the camera and through the little peephole at the top. So they don't have mirrors in them. I'll explain what a mirror does in a minute. So let's have a look. So we'll go back to our Pentax Super program. That's what it used to be called in America. It's a Super A in Australia. I've got a couple of these, and I used to shoot weddings with them. So with all SLR cameras, they have interchangeable lenses, so you can put different lenses on them. And some cameras don't have interchangeable lenses, but the three that I've showed you, you can change the lenses on them. So it's just a matter of pressing a button here and undoing that. And in there, you can probably see there's a mirror in there. I don't know whether you can see that in there. I'll bring it up close. You can see that mirror in the middle there of that circle there. Now that is covering up the back of the camera where the film is, the film that winds through from one side to the other. And every time you take a shot, that little mirror flips up and an exposure is made onto the film, and then you wind on to the next shot and take another one. Now, with a digital camera, you can take the lens off. I'll show you what happens when we take the lens off. And that also has a mirror. So we'll go back to our Canon here. This has just got a fixed lens on it, a 40mm lens on this one. It's a nice lens. I'm just going to take that off, same way I took the other one off. And now in there, you should be able to see a mirror. There's a mirror in there too. A little bit of light coming through there. Can you see that mirror in there? It's not quite the same size as the other one, as the other mirror. But what actually happens when you take a photo with this one, that mirror enables you to look through the viewfinder. And it's like binoculars with a prism. You're looking through a prism, so you can actually look out through the lens. The same with the other one. So, but when you actually take the shot, that mirror flips up and allows the light to expose through the lens onto the sensor at the back of the camera. Instead of film back here, in there, there's a digital sensor that receives the light and stores it in that sensor. And then you go on to the next shot. So that's that one there. So I'm going to also show you a little bit more about this in a minute, but we'll just put that lens back on there. Now I'm going to show you the mirrorless camera. Okay, got that one on there. So now we're going to show you the mirrorless camera. What did I do with that? That was this one here. Okay, this is a bit smaller. This is what they call the micro 4/3 system. Now this is a smaller camera. It's got smaller lenses, but they do a mighty job. But you don't actually have a mirror in it. When you take a photo with those other cameras, the shutter goes clunk when the mirror comes up, so it makes a noise. These are pretty noiseless. So I'll take this lens off, much the same way as I took the other lens off. Now you look in here, and you can actually, there's no mirror in there. That is actually a sensor. You're looking straight onto a sensor there, a little digital sensor, electronic sensor, which is where the film is, where the image is captured on there electronically and stored on there, and then you go on to the next shot. So there's no noise of a mirror slapping up and down when you take the photo with a mirrorless camera. But when you do it with a digital SLR camera or a digital film SLR camera, you do get a noise as you click the shutter. So that's what you have there with the, so basically with all these cameras, you are capturing light through a lens onto a medium, whether it's film or a sensor, and it's storing it on the film or in the SD card. The card is being stored, that image is being stored on the card that goes into the little digital SD card, secure digital card that stands for, I think, and that stores all your images, which you can then take that out and put that onto a computer, those shots. Whereas with film, you've got to get the film taken out of the camera and developed at a film lab and printed or digitized for you, so you can then do something else with that. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the process. Now, with these film cameras, you've got settings on them, and you've got apertures. I'll explain what I'll show you what an aperture looks like in a minute on one of these film cameras. I've got some photos up here on the computer, and I'll try and find those for you. But basically, I'll go into that next time. That's just to show you that these cameras are all very similar, except the film and the digital and the mirrorless cameras, they operate a little bit differently. The old film cameras, a lot of them, the ones that I started off with, you didn't have any automatic settings, so you had to set everything manually. But then they started getting programs and settings that you could use on the film cameras as well. I've got several cameras that do that. And then, of course, when digital came in, it gave you the same options again, shooting stuff in program mode or aperture or shutter priority or manual mode. These are terms that you'll pick up as you go along. So let's just see if I can show you how much light is getting into the camera. Depends on how wide your aperture is. Your aperture is, if you think about your eyes, if I'm in here, it's not all that bright in here, but my pupil in my eyes will, depending on if it's in dark, it will go down, it'll open up to allow me to see better. If I go outside in bright sunlight, my eyes will go down to a small little peephole there because they're adjusting automatically. Our eyes are an automatic camera. We adjust automatically for light and shade and dark and brightness. Whereas the cameras, you have to tell them what to do, either with a digital camera automatically or whatever. And with the old film cameras, you've got to really work out how to do that. And that's not all that hard. So I'm just going to show you a little bit, and then I'm going to stop because I can't tell you all this in one go. just see if I can find these shots on here somewhere. Okay, just had a interruption there while I was trying to find what I was looking for, and then the phone rang. So I thought I'd better stop all this and start again. So I'm just continuing on from where we were. So I was talking about how I was going to show you on the screen here what apertures look like in a camera. This is both a film camera or a digital camera or a mirrorless digital camera. This is the lens that I had on that other manual camera before. Now, you see, looking through that there now, you can see that's quite a big hole, big aperture going through there. If you look through this way, you can see that hole there is wide open. That's wide open, that aperture. Now I can sort of move that a bit on here. So that's called f1.4. I'm going to move it through to about f4, and you see how that hole is not quite so big now. See that? Maybe if we come back this way. See, it's a bit smaller now. And then if I go to f11, you can see it's even smaller now, see? And I'm just going to show you that on the big screen here. I'm going to get into this here and show you the back of one of those cameras with the back open, one of these film cameras with the back open, and then show you what it looks like for each of the different aperture settings on the back of the camera. So let's see if we can now go back here. Wait a minute. I'll just go back to wherever I was. So I'm now going to share the screen with you. And now we will have all these things coming up here. We want to get onto this one here, and we're going to view that full screen. Okay, so there you have the back of a Pentax film camera. You see the knob on the left-hand side there is the rewind knob that's up in the place there. So that film gets wound from one side to the other across that film plane at the back there. Now that's not open there at the moment, but when we I then set it up like this. There you are. That was the maximum aperture at f1.4 or f1.8 it was. And then progressively, as you change your aperture, and remember your digital camera can do this automatically, or you can do it manually. As you change the aperture, which dictates how much light is coming into the camera and how much is falling on the film plane or how much is falling onto the digital sensor, this opening in the lens, see now it's getting down a bit smaller there now, and a bit smaller, and a bit smaller, and a bit smaller, and a bit smaller, and a bit smaller. And then that last one there is f16. You can see f16 on the barrel there. You've got 1.8, 2.8, 4, 5.6, 8, 11, and 16. So all of those settings there, the higher the number, the smaller the hole. The smaller the number, the wider the hole. It's a sort of a reverse psychology, if you can think of it, when you're thinking about this. So if I'm outside and it's very bright out there, my pupils are going to come down to about f16. Well, literally, figuratively speaking, they don't actually have f-stops in my eyes, I don't think, but they automatically adjust to whatever they require, because if it's bright light, you don't want to have it all blowing out in your head and you get all that glare. That's why we have sunglasses sometimes. But if I was in here and had the lights off, I might want to go right down here to f1.8. You see where I've got the pointer down there? I'll just move it over there, which was the wider one. So that gives you some idea. It's another bit of a shot of the lens. I'm just going to stop the sharing now and come back to where I was. So basically, what happens is, however sensitive your film is or however sensitive you set your camera on, your camera has a setting called ISO, which equates to the old film speeds. You only could ever use one film at a time in a camera, and they were rated at different speeds. So they were rated for using flash, they were rated for bright sunlight, they were rated for indoors and all sorts of things like that. And if you wanted to change the settings on your camera to let in different lighting conditions, you had to change the film. But these days you don't need to do that. with digital cameras, because you can just flick a switch on the camera and it'll change what used to be the old film speed. And then next video, we're going to get in how to juxtapose, I don't know that's the right word, how to mix and match what we call the shutter speed and the aperture and the ISO, what's called the photographic triangle. If you get those things right, then you can get a really good exposure on your camera. It won't be washed out, it'll be just right. But there are different ways you can expose and get the correct exposure. But for any number of shots that you take, there can be actually more than one correct exposure. If you've got about 6 or 7 settings on your lens, you can actually, by combining the shutter speed with the aperture, you can do different creative things with your settings. So you can actually have correct creative exposure, where everything is designed to either make blur or freeze action, all that sort of thing. Anyway, that's getting a bit complicated now. So I hope you found that interesting today, and I'll just finish it up there, and we will look into some of the next steps as we go, as I outlined earlier in my introduction. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This series, I'm going to call it Taking the Mystery Out of Photography. I hope I haven't mystified you too much today. So thanks for watching. Like if you like, subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you next time.